Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Rock the Midlife. I'm sorry I've been away a little bit. Between everyone actually catching that flu that was going around over Christmas, and between, all this news going like crazy, I have other channels and I do report on the news a little bit. So I apologize for not getting going on Rock the Midlife again, but I am going to rebroadcast some stuff that I did last spring on a different channel, and it's about self-victimization. Now, our powers that be have kind of made this seem like a good thing, but it's really not when it comes to our body. And I want to dive into that in this two-part series. Today's episode, part one, actually has a little bit of a confession from me in it, and you might want to watch it, and how it's a little bit of a testimony of when I went through a time in my life where I was in a self-victimization mode. And I got through it, and I've gotten to where I am. Now, it does take work. Now, before we get going, I just want to remind you guys to like the channel, comment, and share if you can. Now, it really helps to grow this channel, especially when I've been very delinquent on this channel for many years. So I'm trying to get it going again. I also would like to hear from you. First of all, what are your thoughts on self-victimization? Secondly, please feel free to share if you have gone through self-victimization yourself, or you've experienced it from others. Now, please don't name names if you're sharing it from others. Please be general in your comments, but I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear how it's affected you, whether it's from your experience or for someone else's. Please comment. I'd love to hear. Anyways, moving on, we're going to watch this episode, and there might be a few edits in it, but pretty much all of it's intact still. That's important for today's episode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. Well, a year ago, I started podcasting as a critic to current health issues out there, and I really enjoyed doing that. We started with new items and just worked our way through them. News items, basically. And yes, we even got shut down by Google. Wow. Believe it or not, that was fun. I really miss the podcasting, so I'm getting back into it. And today I've decided to kind of change it up a little. News items were great, but we really need to look at what's important to people today. We need to stick to relevant topics that make people, or that educate people and help them make educated decisions. So we're going to shift modes, and we're going to start taking on specific topics. We may cover news items and even do interviews from time to time. But I do feel we need to stick to specific topics that people want to know more about. And with that said, today's topic may be really controversial. It's, brace yourselves, it's about self-victimization. But before we go on to this topic and start to pick it apart, let's go into a short break.
Since that day, I lay here waiting, wondering if I'll ever feel normal again. They tell me help is 2 years away. Is there any alternative help out there? Where do I find it?
Try the Vibrasonate Wellness app. With more than 100 hours of self-care instruction video, personal training courses, live-streamed group wellness content, frequency and rife wellness tones, healthy recipes, fitness info, habit trackers, podcasts, product reviews, research info, and so much more. Install Today in. Start your enhanced self-care journey now.
Okay, now before we get started, I just want to do a disclaimer here. I am not a doctor. My background training is in medical lab and holistic studies. Anything I talk about in my program is for information only, and anything I share on this program is recommended to be run by your doctor first. So now into our regular program. So why is self-victimization so near and dear to me? Well, I want to tell you a little story. Yes, I'm going to make myself very vulnerable here because this story is about me. And the purpose of this story is not to broadcast my self-victimization that I used to do, but it's to show you how easy it is to get locked up into that mode and really cause problems in your life. So many years ago, actually it's about 24 now, I moved into a community in northern Saskatchewan. I took on a job as a medical lab tech. I needed work. I had come off of an injury and no one wanted to give me the hours. So I was forced to actually take on another job elsewhere. So we moved our family from the south to the north, and I took on this job. I did the orientation. I went through everything. Everything was just fine. And I went home to see my family because we hadn't moved them back up yet. I went home to see my family. I came back and all of a sudden things had changed while I was gone. Not sure what happened. But part of it I do know was to do with the fact that there was union issues getting into trying to make a schedule for me. And the lab manager that hired me started to have a little bit of a temper tantrum, for lack of a better word, and threatened to quit. Well, the hospital said, "So long, we'll see you later." And I'm not naming his name because it's not really important. I have a lot of respect for him, and that's the main thing. He was doing his best to do what we could, and there was rules, and there probably was a better way of approaching it, but that's the way he knew how to do it. Next thing I know, when I come back from that visit, he's gone, and they're looking at me with an evil eye. And they said, "Well, we're making you do your orientation all over again." I'm not sure why, because I had been successful at my orientation. So I did, and they extended my probation a couple of months, and then I don't know, I would think it was probably, I'm guessing, a month before that extension was over, they called me in the office and they fired me. Now, my husband said, "I got a new job. We are not moving the family back. We are going to try to make a go of it." So we did. And the whole time I was in there, in that town, I felt many people were looking at me like I was a criminal, and I wasn't quite sure why. We lived there for another 6.5 years, and then all of a sudden, it finally came out. Now, apparently, my husband knew about this, and he never thought anything of it, and he just dismissed it. Other people had approached him. But one person who we respected highly in the community came out and came up to him and said, "Well, we heard that your wife was fired because she didn't have a license to practice." And he came home and told me, and I said, "What? What are you talking about? I was licensed for 2 years after, and I finally let it go because I can't get a job in this area." So I let it go. Anyhow, I called into the licensing board, and they verified all that. I had been licensed for 2 years after. But I was just, oh, that's what's going on. They think I am a criminal here. And so what did they do? What did I do? I said, "Well, I'll show them." And I went and got a job in a city about an hour and a half away. Anyhow, I continued to work in that city. Things were just fine. But I was self-victimizing. And every time I passed by a police officer, I passed by anyone with any kind of authority, bosses, whatever, I just go into this cringe mode. I was very bitter. I was upset with what happened, and I made it known that I was very upset about it. And people actually would take offense to it. And it made me go down even further into a downward spiral. Finally, one day I realized I was sitting in my new church, and the pastor did a sermon, and he said, you may have been wronged by someone and you cannot help that. It's been done. What do you do? And it's not their responsibility to apologize or take it back or anything, but it's your responsibility to get over that bitterness. Otherwise, you're going to go into an endless pit. And that's exactly what was happening with me. So I worked at it. And I worked at it. Now, I did a lot of praying. I worked initially through the church, and I had to get through that whole forgiveness. I had to go through that forgiveness process. But later years, I worked through natural bioenergetics, which is something I'm trained in. And I actually was able to work through a lot of that hurt, a lot of that bitterness. And it's funny because in the next few days, I am going to testify in a court case down south, because I worked for a few years during the pandemic down south again. Because I collected a blood sample on someone who was driving impaired. And there's a possibility that may come up, and I'm not even afraid of it anymore because I did absolutely nothing. One thing someone said to me once was, there's a difference between guilt and shame. Shame is usually a result of someone trying to make you feel bad. You never necessarily done anything wrong, but it's different. Where guilt is something because you know you've done something wrong. And there's a difference. I may have felt shame, and I may have been bitter over it, and worked through it, and today I'm doing so much better. And it's been a process that's been very rewarding. Now, fast forward this many years, I've worked with people that also have self-victimized and felt like they were destroyed since I started working in the holistic health. It is a real struggle for many people because they want to cling on to that idea that someone hurt them and it's that person's responsibility to fix them. Well, it's really not. I have news for you. I have news for all of you that are in that self-victimization mode. That is what is destroying you. It is not what the person did to you. The offender, yes, did something very wrong, but you are destroying yourself 100 times over. And yes, that's right. You are the one that needs to get over that bitterness. That person who destroyed you cannot do that for you. Essentially, things won't get better unless you make it better yourself. That's pretty hard words, isn't it? Today, it's acceptable to be self-victimized. If you don't believe it, look at our powers that be in the woke ideology. What are our woke leaders telling us? They're encouraging self-victimization. But this is destroying us as a people, and it's preventing us from getting better. Down the road, this will only lead to severe mental health problems, and it can also lead to your body breaking down from the stress into sickness. How is that so? It's actually simple body chemistry. Self-victimization is a stress itself. And if you've heard of the fight or flight reflex in your body, that's a hormone reflex to help you deal with danger. It's an emergency thing. It's an emergency system, and it pumps out negative hormones, which are designed to initiate an emergency response in your body. You've heard of the adrenaline rush? That's what the fight or flight instinct or reflex is. The problem with self-victimization is it keeps stimulating those negative hormones that keep you in that emergency state with no break. Any kind of stress, chronic stress can do that. That becomes your new normal, and your body can't handle that forever. It's just too much hormone running through you. And it eventually breaks down with some sort of sickness. Now, going back to self-victimization, it's not the responsibility of the person who made the offense to you. Contrary to popular belief, to fix that situation, it doesn't change whether they did it or they didn't. Yeah, they still did it. You and only you are responsible for your emotions. Keeping yourself in this negative state will only put you or haunt you later down the road. You need to get yourself out of that state. Yes, there is help. And there are several kinds of specialists out there that can help. But you still have to take that responsibility to do the work on those emotions and work through it all. It sounds harsh, doesn't it? But I did it. I worked through much of my problems using mostly natural bioenergetics. That may not work for everyone, but it worked for me. And this may not be the way for you, but it is your responsibility to find out what works for you and get that help. Sometimes it's just a simple mind shift for people. Sometimes it goes a lot deeper into trauma. We have certain ethnic groups today, and I'm not criticizing them, that are encouraged by the woke society to rekindle these emotions and act this bitterness out. We see this destroying them as a people. It's really sad. And it's not that we are denying that they didn't, it's not that we're denying that they experienced these issues in the past or their ancestors experienced it. It's the choices today that are destroying them. They need to learn how to move on. Yes, partially it's forgiveness. I am not a psychologist, but I can assure you that your body will welcome a release of that kind of stress. And I encourage you to do the research that you need, whether your issue is trauma-based or it's pride-based or it's something else altogether. It is your responsibility, not the offenders, or the offending group, not the specialists to make it better, not even the government to help you get a grip on your offended feelings. It's your responsibility. You need to work through that. You need to get rid of that bitterness so you can move forward. Yes, again, I say this sounds tough, but only you can control your destiny. I encourage you to give it a try. We have plenty of help on my app, on my site, etc. to get you going. I know you can make a better life for yourself. No one else can do that. And once you do, you will feel so good. I did it for myself. You can too.
Okay, thank you for watching this. I hope that was inspiring for you. And next video will be about part 2. And we're going to get into a little bit more in it. I made myself a little bit vulnerable in that for good reason, because I wanted to show you guys that no one is above it and we all can fall prey to it. It's very important that we self-adjudicate and we understand what's going on with ourselves so we can actually learn from it. I don't want to get critical here. That's not the point. It's just important that we have an understanding that it can affect any one of us. And then we need to know what we can do from here to move on. So in my next video, I'll be releasing part 2. And I hope you enjoyed this. Please, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it. Please subscribe. That really helps the numbers. In this time of everyone YouTubing, it's helpful if we can beat that logarithm and drive this video up. Like, share, comment, and tell me what your thoughts were. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.